Thank you, and well done for showing what human rights really means, what democracy really means, and what academic really means, because the so-called climb down by the university is only to your credit. Nobody would have known about this if we had not used what some people call the fourth estate, the media, to expose what's going on. And if the Dalai Lama comes here on the 13th of June, then the students, particularly from Tibet, should be up front to welcome him. It shouldn't be great academics who've been cowardly given the opportunity to big note themselves on that occasion. A representative group of your students should be in whatever auditorium they use to welcome the Dalai Lama on that occasion. I'm just going to talk briefly about three things that explain, I think, the culture of this place and the culture of universities around Australia and elsewhere that undermine any notion of freedom of speech. The first thing to be said is that we all know, or should know, that this great institution is influenced unduly by a group of businessmen. That the major influence on the University Senate is run by a group of businessmen who have said very explicitly that where large sums of money are involved, then ideas of intellectual freedom are a sort of 19th century leftover. They're irrelevant. That's their view. So it's run by, watch this, because you're all victims of this. You're not students, you're just commodities. You're no more important than second-hand cars on the Prince's Highway. You're important because you can pay exorbitant fees. The place is run by people who lick their fingers and put their wet finger in the air to see which way the financial wind is blowing. And that's what's happened over this issue. The second point I want to make is about the culture of compliance. I notice most of the police and security people have disappeared for a minute. But the quality that is valued most highly recently in the administration of the university is people's obedience. Not their imagination and their free will, not their guts and courage to stand up for human rights, but their willingness to be obedient. It's almost as though we're supposed to be living in Tibet or China. And yet that's the very opposite of what a university should be and used to be about. So this culture of compliance is everywhere. I've sadly met with all sorts of students and staff in the past week since the publicity started about this issue, who have talked only about their fear of being reprimanded, their fear of losing their jobs. That is an absolute disgrace in the university. The notion that people, even as recent as yesterday, took me aside to speak to me about these issues, but took me aside to a place where they thought we could not be overheard. This notion of fear, which is a characteristic of the spin doctors who send out absurd statements about what has gone on in the past week, because what you've done is not only insist on welcoming His Holiness to the university, but you've exposed as clearly as the recent industrial action did what the maladministration, the narrow forms of management are that to characterize this university. The last thing I want to say concerns the Orwellian claims that have been made about this issue. Beware the people who speak with forked tongues. Beware the people who say, under the rubric of something called the Institute for Democracy and Human Rights, who clearly don't know anything about human rights, who make all sorts of false claims about human rights. Beware what they say, because the first rejoinder to the ABC was that Professor Rees is such a loose cannon you can't believe anything he says, therefore he's responsible for this. That was the first rejoinder. The latest sort of big brother circular, you get it from something called University Communications. It's straight out of a George Orwell novel, and it says that we collectively have been responsible for sensational and misleading publicity. It never happened. We are full of virtue at the university, and there's just a bunch of unfortunate deviants who've caused this uproar. So beware the false claims, beware the kind of Orwellianism, beware the business of thinking that the only purpose is to boast about how many research funds you've got, or to boast about the new title you've given an organisation that doesn't even exist. So beware the boasting that goes on and happened last night at a big formal function here, when you'd think that nothing had ever happened, that the university had only been highly principled throughout. Let me finish by repeating that if the university climbs down, as it says it's going to do, in a way there ought to be only two conditions. Professor Keane and the Vice-Chancellor ought to apologise for what they've done. And I say that because courage in public life is a rare quality these days. The people of Tibet and even the human rights activists in China have to show enormous courage. We should be able to show it every day. It's a bit like Brecht, the great German poet, said that, you know, justice is necessary, but like bread, everybody needs it several times a day. And the final thing I'll say is a repeat of my first point, that if anybody is going to welcome the Dalai Lama to this campus, then it should be a representative group of students. The Peace Foundation agreed with the students we would take responsibility, so we will be welcoming him in the theatre of the State Parliament at 8:30 a.m. on the morning of June the 18th. That event will go ahead anyway, irrespective of what the university does. Thank you for inviting me, and let's express our solidarity with one another, and particularly with the brave people who've organised this protest and ensured that the university has to do their essay again, because they only got 49% the first time, about the nature of human rights.